Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, PBM, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Marks Paneth, Capital One Bank. Additional funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Amerant Bank, Bank of America, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, People's United Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, and these friends. They're called legal eagles. They're the attorneys. They're the advisors. They're the people earning extra money due to COVID and all these relief packages that nobody understands. So they're the advisors and providing information. So today I've assembled these top-notch legal advisors to discuss the state of the market and when the market will change and what's the outlook in the future. My guests include Gary Meltzer, who is the partner in charge of the real estate division at Meltzer, Lipke, Goldstein, and Brightstone LLP. James Alterbaum, the senior partner at Moses and Singer LLP, and Marshall Brovos, who's the head of the New York City real estate practice, but it's also Orrick Harrington and Sutcliffe LLP. So we have really two real estate attorneys and one generic, general corporate real estate master of many things, Jim. So Jim, since you're a CNI business, how do you look at the commerce and industry today? Are they getting bills? Are they getting relief from their landlords?
Well, it all depends, Mike. A lot depends upon whether the industries in which I counsel clients are essential industries. For example, I do work in some healthcare companies. Some of them are commercial laundry companies. So in effect, they don't really need the relief, but there certainly are a variety of companies that do need the relief. And most of them have taken advantage of the programs, and including the new program, whose deadline is the end of March. And to the extent that the funds are really needed and everybody is willing to certify to the fact that these are needed services, and particularly if it's with respect to employees and rent and real estate, that is something that is, I would say, essential for these clients to come through this very tough last year. 2020 was a tough year for everybody. It impacted the legal profession, impacted accounting firms, all kinds of service providers. But particularly with respect to the clients that we service, yes, we have counseled them. We work with many accountants. Because of you, Michael, I've had many relationships over the years with many accounting firms who are clients, and they also work with us consensually in order to enable clients to effectuate the PPP program. And I'm sure that when the second program comes through, at least to the extent some clients need it, because that's always the question, then in fact we'll be counseling them as well. So I think this relief bill that's coming in, the $1.9 billion that Biden's projecting, may be cut back to a certain degree, but the PPP program per se, I think, is going to continue to be part of the programs that are enunciated. So I'm very comfortable with what's been done, what's continuing to be done, and hopefully that by the end of this year, at some point, this will be dissipated to such a degree that people are not going to be so reliant on these programs. We certainly, as a law firm, are not. It's of no interest to us. We're doing fine, but in the beginning, we also had troubles. Orrick is a large firm, but Meltzer Lipke I know very well, and we're middle market. So middle market firms, I think, are hurt more and have been hurt more than the largest firms. Largest firms have huge clients. I'm not even talking about Horrick. I'm talking about the top 10. Those firms are actually doing better, and it's kind of amazing that they are. But their clients are so large that for whatever reasons they're not impacted by this pandemic. But the middle market firms have had a tough road, and last year was not the best year in the world. But I think it's getting better, and I think that law firms, particularly in the estate area, and it's not just a one-shot deal because clients are continuously coming to us for advice on estate planning, asset protection, all the things that customarily one would think of an estate firm. And the largest firms, for the most part, don't do that kind of work. And we've been lucky to be able to utilize the talents of some of our partners in that connection. A lot of our business is coming from healthcare. Healthcare is way up. I wouldn't say that bankruptcy is as up as it should be in our firm, but it is certainly going to be a source of revenue. Litigation is up. I mean, in the beginning, we all had these webinars and seminars concerning COVID, and we all, I'm sure, have on our website the updating of COVID. That's not uncommon. And I'm surprised if any firm doesn't do that. In fact, I think they all do. But the problem we're facing is and it's a good and bad problem. The problem is that people are working remotely. There's a good and there's a bad. I think on the whole, since I've worked remotely most of my career, it's okay. But for the most part, many lawyers want to be in the office, being energized. Our office is open, but I can't say there are a hell of a lot of people who are in the office.
Here's a question for all of you.
Yep.
During this time, how easy or how difficult has it been for you to secure new clients, new individuals, as opposed to current clients for additional work? Gary?
A lot of the real estate industry over the years has been networking in groups. It's been through charities, philanthropies, and industry events. And it's possibly the most highly networked practice area that's out there from what I can tell. So we've not had those things other than some of the organizations have gone to virtual events, but that's not great for networking. You can't really network at those. That's just for informational and to keep people active. So I have found that there's been an emphasis on, and sort of the people who have done best, I would say, are those who are getting referrals. And another source that's been very strong for me this year has been getting business from the other side of transactions over the last several years. And so while you're not getting business by being in front of people and meeting people at events, the way that business has come in now is really based much more on the substantive abilities that you have, that you've been able to demonstrate through working on transactions and having an audience that become either the direct clients or accountants or other people in transactions that have seen what you do and have referred potential clients that become clients to you. So that's how a lot of my business has come about over the last year. And then I'll say one other thing just on the industry as a whole. We had in the real estate group, when the pandemic started, I think lots of transactional lawyers, especially in the real estate area, thought that I may not have another deal for the next year. Like we thought it was doom and gloom when things started. It turned out that in real estate, we had our best year ever. And I think the reason that has been and will continue to be is because even though people have perceived the real estate market, in 2017, 2018, 2019 as on fire and incredibly strong, the last 4 or 5 years, people say that based on pricing is so high. Prices are seeing record levels, but that doesn't mean transactions are happening. In fact, when prices are so high and you're at an elevated market price, transactions don't exist as much. But now what we're seeing because of the pandemic, we're seeing prices coming down to levels that are more reflective of fear, of a slow retail environment, and people not being so bullish on the economy. So that has actually spurred on many more transactions than we normally would have seen, because now we finally have buyers and sellers coming together on what they think is the right price based on this economy versus buyers not biting at the elevated sale prices that we had seen over the many years.
Marshall, I noticed on your website that prior to COVID, or maybe at the beginning of COVID, you were handling an international transaction for foreign investor. Have you seen foreign investors plan to come to the U.S. right now, or are they quiet? What's happening with regard to foreign investors?
We closed a deal, I think, in February of 19, just before the COVID crisis, and it was for foreign client. Actually, it was for a Sharia compliant investment, which was actually kind of interesting. And that deal closed. We have seen investors like that want to get back in the market. Typically, what I found with the foreign investors in the past is that they've looked in New York and other gateway cities for large opportunities that something to point to in the skylines. But what I've noticed now in our foreign investor clients is that they are looking to go into tertiary markets. They're looking for yield in addition to what had up till that point been really just looking for the blockbuster building. So I think they're becoming more like our domestic investors, if that may be an interesting result of the COVID crisis.
Gary was involved with a transaction on the Sunrise Mall recently, where people would say it was a bargain. It truly was a bargain because it's a repositioning. Do you think there are great opportunities out there for companies who have money, who have capability in this market? Gary?
Yeah, I think there are tremendous opportunities. And, that's a great example, Michael, as you say. And as you know, that acquisition by Urban Edge took place on December 31st, the last day of the year. And yes, it was at a huge number, at a number that was so far off of what their seller had paid. But that's just reflective of where the retail market is. And also, high level of real estate taxes impacts what businesses are doing and able to afford. But that's a great example. And we will see more transactions like that. But in that case, it's a million square foot plus mall. So retail is down, but it's 77 acres. And, there are so many barriers to entry in this region that when there's an opportunity to acquire such a large property, where you can really have flexibility to do many things with and redevelop and repurpose, and especially in sites that are retail and where you have big boxes that are failing, many have gone bankrupt, that just creates opportunities. And those types of buildings and structures can be repositioned into warehouse and industrial, things that are just hot in the marketplace right now. And so we're going to see, just like that Urban Edge purchase, we're going to see people and businesses who have the resources, meaning cash, and that was an all-cash deal. When you don't have to service debt, and the debt markets are not strong yet. So if you have cash and you can buy an asset that really creates opportunities to repurpose, you're going to see many of those transact.
Here's a question more for Jim, and then I have a question for Marshall. Jim, do you see, with the aging baby boomers, are many of them saying, hey, look, I've gone through a couple of recessions, I've gone through all this, now I have COVID, maybe it's time for me to sell my business or think of different approaches. Is that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. But I'd like to pick up just for a second on something that Marshall said in your question, Michael, about the international world. From my perspective as a corporate lawyer and a banking lawyer, I have seen a lot of intersection of foreign companies as well as domestic. And I'll pick up on your question further, Mike. For example, I will tell you that one of my clients is heavily involved with the Australian market. We've actually been representing a financing source that is investing in Australia. We also represent a company, which is a pharma company, which is a popular industry these days, obviously, that has its base in Australia. So I've become a little bit Australian in my approach. We've even hired a comp expert in Australia. And it's interesting. Of course, it's a common law country, so it's different, but not that much, except for the social welfare benefits that Australia has. We also have found that there are banking clients that have foreign operations, which are very robust at this point. and I'm sure, you know, it looks like Marshall's nodding his head, agreeing with me, that in fact, one of a new client of ours, which came in just no more than 8 or 9 months ago out of the blue through a contact I had, is a bank whose headquarters is in Germany, provides all kinds of credit financing, trade financing, things of that nature, to middle market and larger companies. We found them to be a very aggressive bank, doing great. We have a cadre of foreign banks who, just by virtue of their not being US banks, have various areas, not just banking, but they have hedge funds areas. They've got all kinds of diversified areas. So the foreign market is actually surprisingly robust, maybe not surprisingly. Insofar as your question, Mike, because the day-to-day business I have is M&A business. Strangely enough, we are involved in a deal that's well under $1 billion, but a large deal for one of our clients is actually providing us, looking to sell only one part of its business. It's a healthcare company that we're very, very happy and given us a lot of work, including some accounting firms that Mike and I know, and you gentlemen know of as well. So I feel that insofar as M&A is such, but that's not a typical deal. You're talking about the middle market company that's looking to exit. I think you're 100% right. As people are getting older, and particularly with COVID, I think people have sort of said, they've had it, or the threat of COVID, even if it hasn't happened to them, fortunately. You know, clients of ours who come to us are saying, you know, now with all the, and also there's a negative, the contemplation of lower tax rates, you know, for corporations, or higher tax rates, I should say, as well as the estate tax, you know, certainly going down, the exemption being 11 million, now it's going to go to 5, possibly 3. It's giving people pause, and they're saying to themselves, we want to get there under the radar screen. We want to do this now. We don't want to wait till the laws change. Of course, there could be grandfathering and all that kind of stuff, but you can't control that. So yes, there is a combination of people seeking liquidity, looking at the market, saying to themselves, you know what, this is a good time to do things, as opposed to the multi-generational deals, which I've had in the past, and they still have those clients. The best thing I think we'll all agree is day-to-day clients. They're the ones who feed us. And so I find that for the most part, those clients are continuing to give us work. But Michael, certainly you're 100% right. This is the right time to contemplate a deal. And working with a bunch of investment banks in different industries, I find that there's always somebody who can help some of these people. And some of them go direct.
Here's a question for all of you. Since fortunately, as you said, Gary, your business was good last year. All three of you, your business was fine. Part of the role of an attorney is for recruitment. You have to get the next generation over there. How are you doing on recruitment? And is it a different way that you recruited last year and what you're contemplating for recruiting for the next year? Gary?
Yeah, you know, we have, the way we recruit is through online, is through campuses, you know, on-campus interviews. And so there's no in-person, but we're doing, for many schools, you know, our online interviewing now. And so we're doing that. And so, you know, recruiting is still the same for us. We have a summer program, albeit last summer, this summer people were remote. But so recruiting is happening. It's just online and virtually. But that leads to, you know, an interesting, what will be a problem in the development of attorneys. So with young attorneys, summer attorneys, and also, you know, first-year lawyers, second-year lawyers, new lawyers who are coming to firms. And so we've had all our lawyers who were set to start as first years start, but it's by remote. And so the problem with remote working, when the pandemic started, I think we would all agree, it went great. We were, industry-wide, we were like, wow, this really is working and can work. And I would say after a couple months, it was diminishing returns, at least for me and my observations. So, you know, the in-office collaboration that's so important doesn't happen. The efficiency of you walk down the hall to an office a few away because you're on a deal, you're working on something, you want to bounce something off of somebody. It just doesn't happen with that level of efficiency and the collegiateness. That is a big part of the practice of law and brainstorming. And now for young people, you know, so much of training as a young lawyer is to be a fly on the wall, is to sit and observe what's going on, to be part of calls and as an observer, and to just absorb what's going on around you and interact with people. and be part of conversations or a spectator to conversations. That integration just is not happening for young lawyers. So I don't think the remote working, and now we're just talking about the legal industry, but I'm sure this is sort of a common theme in lots of businesses. It's just not a long-term solution. So I think when the vaccine kicks in and people are comfortable going back to the office, we are going to see that there's still a real need for offices, and businesses are going to get back to usual in office. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Now, do you see people working more in the future? Will people work 5 days a week in the office, or will they work 1 day a week, except for Jim, because you've been working remotely for years, okay? I mean, in general, how do you see the operation? Because that's also a question of how much space you need and what you're planning to do. Marshall?
So I think that's a great question. Like Gary, I think there is a need for offices. We will never be, particularly in the legal profession, we will never be 100% remote. One of the reasons we went into the legal profession is because we like working with people and solving problems on a collaborative basis. And you can't do that sitting in your apartment, in Manhattan or in your home. That being said, I think we're going to look at the offices differently. I don't think we need as much space. We certainly need conference space, but I think the idea of the partner getting the corner office is something we best left with Don Draper. I think we're moving into a place where people don't have a permanent office, where you come into the office and take whatever may be available on that particular day, and you have use of the conference facilities. I don't know. I couldn't tell you how much space a particular law firm or business needs, but it's certainly less than what they're using now.
Gary, have you seen any of your tenants, your clients, asking to reduce their rent today? Or has it, it's a year after COVID, what's happening with regard to that?
I still have, yes, I still have, not nearly as much, but there still are businesses that are not getting back to where they were. And they don't see that in the future they will as well, because although in the office businesses we've talked about for law firms, I think it'll get mostly back to the levels with some different needs in terms of offices. There are businesses that are not doing the type of business or the level of business that they used to or will. There are businesses that are permanently affected by the pandemic, restaurants, for example, and back office, service providers. So we're seeing, like, for example, Godiva Chocolate is closing down all of their stores. Well, that then affects the corporate office, structure. So there are many businesses that are not going to get back to where they were. And so, yes, we have those clients still asking and still trying to negotiate deferrals. But at this point, it's interesting. It's transitioned from deferrals to abatement, because deferrals just kick the can down the road.
Right.
And, eventually there is a reckoning. If business is off, it's going to be permanently off. It's going to be at a reduced level, a lower level. So I am telling clients who come to me and say, I can only get my landlord to agree to some deferral. I say, that's not good enough. What does that accomplish? You're just going to have to write a bigger check later on, when now, a year after the pandemic, sort of the cash flow structure is pretty much now what it's going to be.
I'd like to ask each one of you, what do you think of the opportunities available, let's say in September or October of the year, when the vaccine kicks in, when the world comes back to a certain level? Where do you see the opportunities for you, Marshall, then Jim, and then Gary?
God willing, that happens sooner rather than later. So I think the opportunities are manifold. I mean, starting in New York, just sort of outside of the context of investment, I mean, we've got to remember that the Climate Mobilization Act is still a thing, and we are rushing towards the first testing period in 2024. As everybody knows, under New York City Local Law 97, carbon emissions need to be reduced by 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050, and that train hasn't stopped yet. So
right.
People need to focus on that. But stepping back, where opportunities are, as you all know, a lot of institutional investors frankly, have not been able to transact because, frankly, they can't get on planes. They can't visit, they can't kick the tires of properties. I think with the vaccine, people feel more and more comfortable getting on those planes, and people will transact.
So you believe investment sales will go up. Jim?
I feel very strongly, Mike, that the M&A business is going to be increasingly robust as this year goes on. You know, a lot of the investment bankers I deal with, they keep calling me to see if I have matters for them. But now I'm seeing that some of our clients are actually seeking out M&A deals, financing deals, and so forth. So I'm looking forward to a much more robust year about M&A and various types of financings. I think there's a tremendous need for it. Some of the things that we discussed earlier among all of us, it's critical. Because without that, and you know, the conundrum of it all is that the market, the stock market keeps going up, notwithstanding the grim economic news, which is a good thing because, you know, ultimately the market rules, whether you're talking about venture work, whether you're talking about accredited investors or, you know, all the kinds of things that, you know, we're accustomed in the corporate business and finance world. So I think that the trailing effect of the recession will be overcome by the continued momentum in the market. I mean, we all say, how the hell could it go up more? But it seems to be always giving.
Gary, last 15 seconds.
Yeah, so right now, I believe there are opportunities in the hospitality industry. I think they'll come September, October, like when things straighten out and normalize, which was your question, Michael. I think there will be continued opportunities and enhanced opportunities in the shopping center / retail world. I think that's where things will not come back to the way things were because of how the online world is booming. So there will have to be sort of a new equilibrium that gets met. So I think that's where, when things come back to normal, we will not see a comeback to normal in terms of the usage and, you know, and consumer demand. So I think that's where the transactions will really be come September and October.
So in conclusion, let's hope the quicker people get vaccinated, people get healthier, and the world gets better. I'd like to thank Gary, Jim, and Marshall, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
You.